6 Tudor Queens, Jane Seymour, The Haunted Queen, Part 1. Today I want to talk about the third book in the series 6 Tudor Queens, Jane Seymour, The Haunted Queen by Alison Weir. This video has been broken into 3 parts because it is so long. The second part of this video will come out next week. This will be the third video in a series covering Alison Weir's 6 Tudor Queen books and her other novels. I love Alison Weir as an author of both historical fiction and real history books. I was not sure if I would enjoy this book when I bought it. I had found Anne Boleyn, the King's Obsession, a little dry the year before, and I had never read anything from the POV of Jane Seymour. I had always considered Jane the boring queen that nobody wanted to write about, but this book turned out to be a gripping read the whole way through. Jane Seymour came to life in my imagination. The book opens with Jane attending a feast in honour of her brother Edward's first marriage to Catherine Fillol. This gives us a good overview of Jane's big family. They seem very happy. Jane's father is the picture-perfect Tudor knight, and her mother is a domestic goddess. The young Jane is very happy and loves her big noisy family, but she is also very pious and wishes to become a nun, something her parents don't take seriously. Then the book skips forward 8 years to Jane spending a few weeks in a nunnery and finding out to no one's surprise but her own that she is not cut out to be a nun. During the 8 years that have passed, much has changed. Edward and Catherine have had 2 sons, but are deeply unhappy together, and Catherine seems to be suffering from postpartum depression. Jane's mother also seems unsettled, but Jane assumes she is suffering the menopause. Jane is unsure what to do with herself now. She is 19 and no longer wants to become a nun, but there are no suitors waiting in the wings to marry her either. Jane is questioning what to do with herself and considers going to court because her brothers seem very happy there, when her world implodes. The Seymour family discover that Catherine and Sir John, Jane's father, have been having an affair for 9 years, and Catherine's 2 sons are probably Sir John's. Catherine is immediately packed off to a convent, but the family are left unsettled and very unhappy, with huge rifts growing between Edward and his father. The family decide to keep quiet about the affair and pretend it never happened. By today's standard, the idea seems very crazy, but by Tudor standards, it's actually a sensible thing to do because nobody wanted a scandal. And the social ramifications of such a scandal. Jane is deeply sad for her mother and her nephews, or half-brothers, but wants to get away from her now unhappy home. She gratefully takes up a post at court as maid of honour to the Queen, but when she gets to court, she is amazed by the amount of gossip that goes on 100% of the time, and the petty jealousies among the maids of honour. This is the first book where you really get to see the life of a maid of honour. Anne Boleyn was never truly part of that world, holding herself aloof, and Catherine of Aragon was royal and never could have been a part of it. Jane makes friends very quickly and becomes best friends with a girl called Marjorie Horseman, but she also has an instant rival in the form of Nan Bassett. She is very homesick at the beginning of her time at court, but soon gets used to everything, and she loves Queen Catherine like a second mother. Jane quickly learns all the gossip about the king's great matter in Anne Boleyn, and takes the Queen's side, comparing the Queen's suffering in silence to Jane's own poor betrayed mother. Jane enjoys the court, but is a little hurt that no young men have come calling, apart from Francis Bryan, but she puts him off, knowing he has a very bad reputation with the ladies. I think Francis Bryan sounds quite sexy with his eye patch and his nickname the Vicar of Hell, but I suppose it is a good thing Jane ultimately put him off, because he would have broken her heart. He never would have stayed loyal to her, and they were pretty close cousins, which makes the whole thing a bit gross. Since coming to court, Jane has learnt a lot about the religious reforms people want, and holds strong conservative views, but she keeps them to herself mostly, as she has been taught from childhood not to question the men around her. She is the complete opposite of Anne Boleyn, who was taught from childhood to question everything. Jane is finally settled at court when the sweating sickness breaks out and she is sent home, only to discover that her beloved younger sister Marjorie is dead, and so is her older brother Anthony. Jane and her family are in deep mourning, and throughout the rest of the book, Jane continues to think about Marjorie from time to time and miss her. Because of these losses, Jane develops a real fear of any plague, something we can all relate to during this time of COVID. When Jane finally gets back to court, she is angry Anne Boleyn survived the sweat when a sweet girl like her sister Marjorie died of it, and it makes Jane even stronger in her resolve to support Queen Catherine. The great matter is now being tried at the ecclesiastical court, and the Queen is summoned to the Blackfriars Monastery. Jane cannot attend the court, but she is on tenterhooks about what is going on there, and does every small thing she can to support Queen Catherine, who she views as a brave and righteous lady. Jane is worried England is being dragged into heresy by Anne Boleyn, and frets about the matter. She also worries about the Princess Mary. I believe Jane is far more aware than Catherine or Henry about how the divorce is affecting Mary. She knows from her own personal experience how a rift between parents can affect their children, and her care for Mary shines throughout the book, especially when she becomes queen later on. During this time, Jane introduces her brother Edward to Nan Bassett and lives to regret it because the two fall in love, much to Jane's horror, as Edward is still legally married to Catherine Fillol, and Nan Bassett is a sharp-tongued bitch. But after informing Edward of Nan's bitchiness, he makes her be a little kinder. The two women will never be close friends though, and Nan still makes the odd barbed comment, especially about Jane's looks, of which Jane is very sensitive, thinking herself too pale and too plain. Life continues though, with no news on the king's divorce, and no suitors for Jane. She now truly believes bitchy Nan Bassett that she is too plain. Then, to make matters worse, Jane's younger sister Lizzie is married before her, and even though Jane is happy for Lizzie, she is very jealous, and wants a family and children, and a man to love her. Jane continues to serve Queen Catherine faithfully, and follows her into exile, as Catherine moves further and further away from the court. She is a little bored, but doesn't mind because she loves the Queen so deeply. Jane has still no luck with love, however, and when a Venetian visitor flirts with her and pinches her bum, she has to laugh it off, saying it is the most interest any man has ever shown her. Jane's brothers, especially Thomas, are very annoyed that she is stubbornly serving Queen Catherine because they cannot see any good marriage prospects arising from this situation. Thomas gets Francis Bryan to arrange a marriage with William Dormer, but the whole thing falls apart before it can even get started because of politics, and it is very upsetting to Jane. She thinks William Dormer didn't like her because she is too plain, and I cannot help but feel sorry for Jane, as she torments herself over her looks and complexion. We have all been there at some point in our lives. Then the worst possible letter arrives. Jane's father is commanding her to leave Queen Catherine's service to serve Anne Boleyn, where her sister Lizzie is already serving as a maid of honour. Jane is upset and angry and complains bitterly to Queen Catherine before going quietly home to Wolf Hall to prepare to serve Anne Boleyn, the woman she considers a whore. While Jane is at home, she becomes very sick, with a fever, and has to recuperate for months. During the time of Jane's recovery, Anne is married, crowned, and gives birth to the Princess Elizabeth. Jane does not want to go to court, but is bullied by her family into going to serve the new Queen Anne. Jane is shocked when she sees Anne, because she looks older and a lot more wary than the last time Jane had seen her. Jane is also scandalized by Anne's lack of queenly formality. Jane is obedient and quiet while at court, but is very happy to be reunited with her friend Marjorie Horseman, who is also serving as a maid of honour. The king notices Jane is back at court, and thanks her for a gift of embroidered handkerchiefs she gives him for Christmas. The king notices her again when she is the only maid brave enough to offer him any comfort after Anne's first miscarriage. Jane is worried about the religious upheaval in the world, especially Bishop Fisher and Thomas More's execution, and she wants to go home, but decides to stay because the king's next progress will go to Wolf Hall, and she will do nothing to jeopardize it, as it is a great honour to house the king. Jane's brothers are unbothered by the reforms, and to Jane's horror they actually agree with them. While on progress, Jane is present for an ugly incident where Anne accuses some monks of forging a religious relic of the blood of Jesus Christ by using the blood of some duck, as she puts it. Jane is horrified by the whole incident and believes Anne is making it up. When the court finally arrive at Wolf Hall, everything goes very well, apart from the fact Queen Anne clearly thinks Wolf Hall rustic and acts snobbily towards Jane's mother. It annoys Jane because she and her mother can trace their lineage back to Edward I, whereas Anne's grandparents were in trade. Jane reminds herself of her noble heritage and tries not to care about Anne's family's riches and their snobbery, but Anne's attitude towards Jane's beloved Wolf Hall hurts. This final snub by Anne makes Jane decide she wants to leave court. At this time the king is introspective. He still has no son and little hopes of one. He wanders out into the garden, where he finds Jane making up her mind to leave court. Henry remembers Jane's kindness to him at the loss of his and Anne's second child and unburdens himself to her. Jane listens sympathetically, unsure how to respond to the king, but he keeps talking to her, and when he finishes talking, he is looking at her with a new light in his eyes. After the conversation, Jane murmurs an excuse and goes to bed, unsure she can believe what has just happened. When she wakes, she is terrified the king will want to make her his mistress. She cannot do that to poor old Queen Catherine. She doesn't give Anne Boleyn a second thought. In Jane's mind, Anne is not Henry's true wife. She is nothing more than a concubine. The king continues to show an interest in Jane, and all she wants is for it to stop. She is attracted to him, but does not want to hurt Queen Catherine, or ruin her own reputation. She has found it hard enough to get a husband without the scandal of being the king's whore attached. When Jane tells her family that she wants to leave court because of the king's advances, they all get very excited, seeing her deposing Queen Anne and becoming queen. Her brothers, Edward and Thomas, are very eager at the prospect of royal favour. She thinks they are all being ridiculous and the king is just flirting a bit, but nevertheless her family make her stay at court. Even her mother sees the benefits of a royal flirtation. This is the end of the first part of this book review. If you enjoyed it, remember to like, comment and subscribe to this channel so you will not miss the second part of the review, which is coming out next week. You can also follow me on Instagram at Lady Jessica Riddell. Until next time, remember we are all bound to obey and serve.